I am sure you will agree. Education is the key to open your door to opportunity. So educate yourself, you see.
I am Dr. Dan Carter. I have been an educator for the past 41 years. I started as a teacher at St. Giles, Christchurch Boys, and some others. Then I became principal at St. Mark's and St. Matthias Primary Schools. Then I joined the Ministry of Education, and I left there as a senior education officer. I retired in 2007, and I was thinking how I would spend the rest of my time. When I was in the Ministry of Education, I did the biography of a former educator, L.T. Gay. A school today is named after him. So I thought in my retirement that I would expand a bit and look at other areas of our system, because we have not written enough about the Barbados education system. And we have a very great system in Barbados. And therefore, the first book in my retirement, I decided to let that focus on the first school for blacks in Barbados. I thought that this would be a historical document that will serve Barbadians well because of our high interest in education. And the first school for blacks, not only in Barbados, but in the Commonwealth, British Commonwealth, the Caribbean, was Society Primary School. That was a school that had its origin in St. John, where Christopher Codrington bequeathed two plantations, Society and another plantation, to the SPG, the Society for the Propagation of the Gospel. And they commenced two schools on the separate plantations. Eventually, they were merged into one, and that became the genesis of the Society Primary School. As usual, it started as a Sunday school, and the Sunday school was a very important institution during slavery. All the missionaries, including the Methodists and the Moravian, started their educational development in Barbados by way of the Sunday school. And therefore, from a Sunday school, the society became a daily school. And from there on, it became a formal part of our primary school system. And that was an important event in that at that time, in the 18th century, slavery was at its height, and the plantocracy was definitely against any attempt at Christianizing or reaching out to the slaves in terms of an education. But eventually, though, the SPG persisted, and today we have the Society Primary School, which went through all the educational experiences of commissions and all the developments that we experience in education. So it's a very important document, and I'm proud that I had given the school some attention because it is part of our history. Then the next document and the next area I thought of was the Ministry of Education itself. A lot of people don't know that although the political parties in the earliest times, the colonial office, they prescribed what kind of educational policy to be carried out in the colonies. It was the chief education officer, previously known as the chief inspector or director of education, people who held those positions were the persons who really carried out the educational policy of the political directorate. And today it is no different. It first started in 1850, the Act of 1850 brought into being the structure of our educational system. And the first chief inspector of schools was a man called Mr. Elliott, and he remained there for some 34 years. I believe he is still the longest serving central administrator in education in Barbados. And after that, then, he actually instituted a lot of the British colonial policies in Barbados that we have in Barbados. And then after that, we moved from a chief inspector, director of education, and today we have a chief education officer. And today we have, for instance, our chief education officer, Mrs. Karen Best. She's responsible for carrying out the policy of the Ministry of Education, the political directorate. And unlike the early days, a chief education officer there has an enormous job of being in charge of a primary school system, a secondary school system, and a tertiary system with thousands of students to look after, thousands of teachers. So it's an enormous task, it's a challenging job, and we thought that Barbadians should be aware of those persons, starting with Mr. Elliott, who were in that position of heading the policy administration in education in Barbados. So those persons who are very, in fact, when he was in education itself, a lot of students used to approach me wanting to know exactly who was the education officer in the 1950s, in the 1960s, and therefore that motivated me more to document these gentlemen who really fashioned our education system to what it is today. After that then, not too long ago, I realized that early childhood education is a growing and important aspect of educational systems, not only in Barbados, to the Caribbean and the world. People see now the opportunity of getting their very young children sort of socialized into an educational environment. And therefore, I thought that perhaps I could take a look at early childhood education, which started in a forceful way in 1948 when a lady called Miss Elise Murray was sent overseas on a Commonwealth scholarship to look at infant methods. And it's there after 1948 that we got the growth and development of the early childhood education going. Decades after, at primary schools, with the development of a large number of secondary schools, a lot of the schools did not have a class 5, class 6, or class 7. And therefore, a lot of space, it left a lot of space then at primary schools. And therefore, principals at primary schools were then able to use that space to bring on younger children into the system. I can remember as a principal at St. Mark's and St. Matthias, parents coming to me in bewilderment, wanting to have their children of between 3 and 5 years old admitted into the school. And that was so throughout the elementary school system. Another important development in early childhood was when the government in 1965 started nursery schools, the first one of which was Earlston Nursery. And therefore, parents saw the need to have their children into these nurseries. And not only the upper and middle-class parents, but an increasing number of lower-income parents too saw the need, and therefore, at one point in the 70s, the 80s, the schools did not have enough space for bringing in these 3 to 5-year-olds. But there has been a growing expansion of early childhood. Government has established more nursery schools, especially in recent times. And when I left the ministry in 2007, I was given a task to see how we could expand more space for children between 3 and 5 years old. And at that time, it was approximately 85% access of children between 3 and 5 years old. Today, I'm almost certain, and I heard it referenced somewhere, the person must be fairly correct, that we can boast in Barbados of universal primary education, universal secondary education, and within recent times, universal nursery education. A fantastic development, and has Barbados in a leading position, because only last week I read in papers that Jamaica and Barbados are leading countries in Latin America and the Caribbean in terms of access to nursery education, early childhood education for 3 and 5-year-olds. So ours started way back in 1948, and I'm very pleased to see that Barbados now is a leading carrying the flag for early childhood education in this hemisphere. And again, I sat back after finishing that document. I said, special education, again, is another major part of our curriculum, and a major part of a developing aspect of our education curriculum. And therefore, I wondered what started there. How did this thing come about, special education in Barbados? And I went as far back as 1951, where Association with Deaf and Blind started a skills program at the Herds Memorial Church in James Street. And from there, the Association for the Blind and Deaf started their program. A lot of different associations began to look after those that were challenged. And at that time, the most important institution was the School for the Blind and Deaf, which is now called the Urban Wilson School. That is a major institution which has grown and developed to the extent that in Barbados we have persons who are visually challenged now accessing secondary education. Ms. Eiffel, who was the former president of the Senate, she was a student at the Urban Wilson, went on to university. In fact, I am now the chairman of the Dylan Griffiths Secondary School, and they are having their first visually impaired student at that school. So that Barbados has matured its maturity by looking after not only those students who are able-bodied, and both physically and mentally, but also the disabled. And a lot of individuals gave of their time and effort to the development of institutions, the Learning Center, the Development Center, Selma Vaughan Memorial. All of those institutions combined over the years to provide skills and educational opportunity for our disabled. I always say that when a society can look after its disabled, its challenged, that society is is a developing society showing a lot of humanity. And today I'm pleased that I've been able to document the history of those associations and to let prosperity see that there were persons who gave of the time to ensure that the disabled become part of our society. Because in today's world, the disabled are individuals with rights. Nowadays, I'm pleased to see that parents carry their children to tongue, take them to parties. Those are challenged. And so I like to pay a lot of kudos to those individuals who, over the years, give their time and effort to the development of those institutions. The Urban Wilson is a classic example of what we've done in Barbados in terms of our development. We not only look after the able-bodied, those with good cognitive abilities and skills, but also those who are challenged. And it is quite obvious to me that in another 5-10 years, a lot more challenged persons will move through the system and end up at the University of the West Indies. During my retirement, I have put my time into good use. I didn't have this opportunity when it was actually in teaching. And I thought that the books that are written will be of benefit to those persons who are into education. For instance, if you are doing early childhood at university, it'd be a good thing to know those pioneers, particularly who helped in the development of early childhood education. Special education is something that persons are doing now at degree level. And it would be a good thing if such persons know something about the early development of special education in Barbados. When I read books authored by persons overseas in these particular areas, they always give some historical section on the early development, and therefore I hope that I'm providing Barbadian students, especially those who are into further study, an opportunity to see where we were and where we are at now. Two things, though, I would like to complete. That is, I'm working now on the vestry system. A lot of Barbados don't know that the vestry did a tremendous job in the early development of education in Barbados, providing schools, paying teachers, providing scholarships for Barbadians and all that. And as a whole, it's not a glamorous topic, but it's one that is critical when we are looking at development of our education system. And finally, really, I would like to conclude now. I usually promise my friends that we'll do it year after year, conclude a history of education in Barbados. I think that we need to put such a document in place. We have achieved a tremendous lot in education. We've achieved universal pre-primary education, universal primary education, universal secondary education, and we are increasing our access at tertiary level. So this is an experience that our young people need to know. We need to know what was the origin of all this. It didn't come yesterday, but it started even during slavery in the 17th century, the 18th century, 19th century, and today I will hope that sometime next year that book will be available.